Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you here. I got to tell you, it's crazy to think we're this far through July already, isn't it? We're going to be stepping into August before you know it, but that's life. That's life. Summer has been good. I hope it's been good for you. If you're visiting with us for the first time, we are so glad to have you here. And to all our regulars, to those watching online, we just love you guys and love doing church together with you. Today we are in week 2 of our series, Ordinary. If this is new to you, our theme verse is this, Acts chapter 4, verse 13, if you want to look up at the screen here. It says this, the members of the council were amazed when they saw the boldness of Peter and John, for they could see that they were, say this with me, ordinary men. That's what they were. They were ordinary men with no special training in the scriptures. They also recognized them as men who had been with Jesus. This is the point of this whole service, of this series. They were just ordinary men. We said at the beginning that so often when we look at these people in the Bible that God used for His glory, for His purpose, whether it's Old Testament or New Testament, we so often forget this fact right here, that they were just ordinary people. We forget the fact that they were just ordinary people like us. They were ordinary people who were committed to a task, to a mission, to a goal, to their God. Ordinary people that God used in extraordinary ways to do extraordinary things. We so often forget that. And the purpose of this series is to encourage you to think about that a little bit, to dream a little bit. I want you to dream about what God wants to do and can do through ordinary you. Because we said God wants to use you. Just the way you are. He wants to use you. So this is the focus of the series. And so what we're doing is we're kind of using Hebrews chapter 11, which is often referred to as God's Hall of Fame, to look at the individuals who are in there. God's Hall of Fame, these are God's heroes. These are God's superstars, His winners. And that's what we find there. Last time we looked at Moses. This week we're looking at Noah. Noah was a unique individual that God used. Look at Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7. It says this about Noah. It says, by faith Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. His faith by his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. Now, the question I kind of want to start with here this morning is why? Why did God choose Noah? Maybe it was because Noah was good with finances. You say, well, how do you know Noah was good with finances? Well, it's obvious he understood the stock market, right? Because while Noah was floating his stock, everyone else was in liquidation, you know. Yeah, I'm sorry, it doesn't get any better. You know, that's about the extent of the funny. Yeah, it's a dad joke. What can I say? But seriously, when you think about this, why did God choose Noah? You see, to answer that question, I think you need to understand something about God and how He works and the ways He works. I want you to look at this verse here, 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 9. Look at this. I want you to think about this. It says, the eyes of the Lord search the whole earth in order to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to Him. Now think about that. That says God is searching the whole earth. Day after day after day, He's searching the whole earth. He's looking at people. He's looking for people whose hearts are fully committed to Him, it says. And when He finds that one person, He wants to do what? He wants to strengthen them. He wants to build them up. He wants to fortify them. He wants to equip them. Why? Because He wants to use them for his work, for his glory, for his purpose, for his mission. That's kind of crazy. It's incredible to think about that. I mean, again, think about that right now. God, at this moment, right now, he is looking at your heart. He is looking inside you. Even as we sit here this morning, he's looking into you. He's looking into me. And the question is, when he looks into us, what does he see in us? Does he see somebody who's fully committed? Does he see somebody who's usable? That's the big question. So why did he use Noah the way he did? That's what we're going to want to look at and dive into this morning. Today we're going to kind of explore 4 characteristics that are commonly found in people that God uses, okay? 4 characteristics. Now, the story of Noah is found in the book of Genesis, the very first book in the Bible. It starts in Genesis chapter 6 and it goes through Genesis chapter 9. But in Genesis chapter 6, it kind of points us to that first characteristic that we're going to talk about here this morning. Why don't you look at this? Genesis chapter 6, starting in verse 5, it says this. It says, "The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on earth." That means he was grieved inside. He was grieved at this when he saw what they had become. In verse 7, it says, "So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race that I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them." But verse 8 says, "But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord." Now, when God looked down, this verse is kind of clear on what he saw. He saw the wickedness that was in the earth that people were putting their hands to, and it says it grieved him. Wickedness was everywhere. But it was through one man, in the middle of all this, one man, he stood out. His name was Noah. It says that Noah found favor in the eyes of God. So why Noah? Why did Noah find favor in the eyes of God? Well, if you're taking notes, you can write this down. The first thing that we see here is Noah was available. He was available. And this is one of the first characteristics that are commonly found in the people that God uses. He was available here. In fact, out of the entire population, he's the only available person that God can find. And in God's eyes, that's the big thing. Availability is so much more important than ability. We want to think that ability is the big thing that God is looking for. But it's not. It's availability. Your attitude is so much more important than your aptitude. It's so much more important than your talent or your skills that you think you bring to God. Oh, look, God, if you can get this, you're going to be really lucky. No, it's not. In fact, your aptitude is usually something that you and I use as an excuse why we can't be used. Oh, I can't do that. God, you could never use me. I'm just an ordinary person. I can't do anything. So often, that's the way we approach this. But the truth is, God is just looking for somebody who will just simply say, "Here I am, use me. I'm going to make myself available to you," because that's what God is looking for. And he will use anyone who's available. I heard a great story about being available and just being used by God. It deals with a guy by the name of Tony Campolo. Now he's an older gentleman right now, but he was on the circuit. I remember being in some services of his. So fun to listen to. But Tony Campolo was a professor of sociology, and he was invited to speak at a college in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania on this day. And before he spoke, there were several guys who were attached to the college that took him backstage, and they prayed for him. They just wanted to pray that God would just give them the right words and help them to share the right things that would just bless the listeners here today. So that's what they did. They were in this back room and they were praying for him, and in the middle of this prayer, praying for him in this service, all of a sudden one of the guys here in this group, he just starts this weird prayer. He just kind of stops what he's doing, stops praying for Tony, and all of a sudden he starts praying this prayer. He says, Lord, remember Bert Harris. Like, Bert Harris. Like, remember Bert Harris. Bert Harris needs you really, really bad right now. He lives in that trailer down the street, and he's considering leaving his wife and his family. So if you could just get through Bert Harris today, if you could just talk to him, Lord, that would be great. And then just that quick, he flips the switch and he's back in praying for Tony. And Tony's kind of like thinking to himself in the middle of this, he was telling about it. He said, that was weird, you know. That was kind of a strange prayer, but after that, he just didn't think much more of it. He just went out and spoke, did his thing, and then after the service, he got in his car and he started driving away. As he's driving away, he sees this guy hitchhiking out of town, and he stops and pulls him over, and he says, hey, the guy got in, he says, hey, I know you're not supposed to pick up hitchhikers, but being a Baptist preacher, I'll take my advantage of a captive audience anytime I can. So the guy gets in and he introduced himself, and Tony just asked him, what's your name? And the guy looks at him and says, well, my name's Bert Harris. And it's like, just that quick. I mean, oh my goodness. Tony, he slams the brakes on, spins the car around and starts heading back towards town. And the guy says, what are you doing? And Tony said, I'm taking you back to your wife and your family that you're trying to leave right now. And this guy he was like a deer in the headlights. He's just, how do you know this? He has no idea what's going on. He just sat there kind of silent there. And Tony, he drives all the way back into town, right up to the guy's trailer. And the guy's like, how do you even know where I live? And Tony looked at him and said, well, God told me, And in a way, God kind of did, through that prayer, through that guy. But they went inside, and that day God used this guy in his strange prayer to restore this family and this marriage. Now, we hear a story like that and we say that's kind of cool. And it is. That's a great story. And some of you say, well, that is a neat story. Why doesn't God use me that way? Why doesn't he do stuff like that in my life? Tony would say he would. He would say to you, if you make yourself available, he will use you. He will wear you out if you make yourself available. That's the point. It's all about being available. You see, the secret is simply this. You need to stop focusing on what you can't do and start focusing on just simply being available. Because so often that's where we start. We start focusing on what I can't do. Oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. Ooh, I can never do that. And when you stop focusing on that and start focusing on the simple fact that you want to be available for God and you're going to step out, that changes everything. I think when we get to heaven, we're going to be surprised when we look around and we see the people that God used. Because I believe we're not going to see superstars. We're not going to see super gifted people. We're not going to be looking at super talented people. We're going to be looking at ordinary people. Ordinary people who were filled with fears. Ordinary people who had their faults. Ordinary people who had their own hang-ups. Ordinary people with average intelligence, but they made themselves available for God and His work. And that's what we find in Noah, I think. The older I get, the more I realize It's so true. God doesn't need superstars. He just needs ordinary people who will step up to the plate and say, here I am. Use me. Do what you want. I mean, look at the disciples. What an incredible example we find in them, because not one of them was anything special. I mean, overall, they were just a bunch of average people. Average people with average jobs, with an average education. And they even had average problems like everybody else. But Jesus handpicked them. He handpicked them. He handpicked these average guys and commissioned them to take this incredible gospel message to the world. Why? Because I believe that's how God works. Right? He uses average people. And this is where it starts. Be available. Next, we see that Noah was different. God uses people in this world who dare to be different. Do you know that? In Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, it says this. It says, Noah was a righteous man, the only blameless person living on earth at the time, and he walked in close fellowship with God. Now think about that. It says he was the only blameless man living on earth at that time. I mean, morally speaking, this tells us the shape of the earth. What was going on. And the fact that it says Noah dared to be different, that's communicating a lot right there. Noah wasn't afraid to stand out. He wasn't afraid to stand alone. He wasn't afraid of what other people thought of him. He wasn't afraid to be different. I mean, my goodness, how many people do you really know that are like that? That is something unique. And when you take that verse and continue reading on, when you get into verses 11 and 12, you just start understanding the corruption that was going on, the violence that was in the world, the immorality that was in the world. It was everywhere. And morally speaking, we see that this world that God built, it was bankrupt. It was messed up. And everybody was doing it. Except for one, Noah. He chose to be different. He didn't allow society to dictate how he was going to live. He wasn't afraid to stand alone and be different. And I'm just saying, that is a rare thing. That is a rare quality right there. In our world today, there's this tendency to think that the majority is always right. That is, if everybody's doing it or if everybody's thinking it, well, I guess that's just the way it is. We just need to jump in line and do this too. Not Noah. To his credit, he refused to go along with the crowd. And because he did, I mean, just think about what that meant for him. He wasn't going to get in line. Think about the criticism that came his way because he refused to be different. He was going to be different. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do this just because you say it's okay. I mean, that criticism, I believe it came not only from the townspeople, but I think there was times when it came from his own family. I mean, his kids, I can hear them. Dad, seriously? Does this have to be in our front yard? I'm sure it wasn't easy for them. The question is, how do you deal with criticism? Well, when people criticize you, how well do you deal with it? How well do you deal with the idea of being different? See, for the most part, on a whole, we don't like that idea. We don't like the idea of being different. In fact, we kind of worry a lot about being different. We don't want to be different. We don't want to I mean, different stands out, right? We don't want to stand out. We would rather kind of just blend in because we don't like criticism. We want people to like us. And that right there itself can become a big trap. The fact that we just want to be liked. Well, what will you do to make that happen then? That's the problem. Look at this proverb here. Proverbs 29, verse 25. It says this. It says, fear of man is a dangerous trap. That means if you worry about what everybody else is always thinking about you all the time, you're going to be in trouble. Because you're always going to be worried about what they think, and you're always going to be trying to please them. Fear of man is a dangerous trap. But it goes on and it says, but to trust in God means safety. See, I believe we can perfectly see Noah in this verse right here. We see him because he didn't seek the praises of people. He didn't care what people thought of him. He was willing to be different. He was willing to stand out in the crowd. He was willing to trust God. Why? What gave him this confidence to be different? What was his secret? Well, his secret was his walk with God. Go back to verse 9 again. It says, Noah was a righteous man, the only blameless person living on the earth at the time, and he walked in close fellowship with God. This is where he found his strength, in that walk with God. This is what gave him everything he needed in that life. This is where he found his strength, the strength to say, I don't care what everybody else does. I don't care what everybody else says. I know God. And God knows me. And I choose to put my faith and trust in Him. See, that's the kind of person that God can use. Noah, he was willing to be different. Another characteristic here is that Noah followed completely. This is something else that God uses people in. When God uses people who will follow Him completely. The problem that so many people have today when it comes to following God is that they only follow God when it's convenient. When it's convenient for them, they'll follow. When it involves something they want or something they can get out of life, they'll follow Him. When it doesn't cost too much, when it doesn't hurt too much, they'll follow Him. But the people God uses, they are the people that follow God no matter what. Look at these verses here. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 22, it says, Noah did everything just as God commanded him. Another verse here, Genesis chapter 7, verse 5, it says, and Noah did all that the Lord had commanded him. It doesn't say he did some of the things that God commanded him. It doesn't say that he did even most of the things. It said he did everything. He did all the things God commanded him, just as God commanded him. Unconditional obedience. That's what we see here. And in a way, obedience is really kind of another word for faith. When you think about it, you say, well, I have a lot of faith. Do you? How much or how well do you obey God day in, day out, without question? Because that takes faith to do that. You see, faith is following instructions. It's obeying instructions, even when it doesn't make sense. And so many times that's where we get hung up. You know, God, I'll do this, but it's got to make sense here. That's not the way God works all the time. Let's just be honest here. The project that God gave Noah, I tell you what, it didn't make any sense. It didn't make sense for a number of different reasons. One reason is, up to the time of the flood, the earth had never even experienced rain. You say, get out of here. Well, look at Genesis chapter 2, verses 5 and 6 here. It says this. It says, "For the Lord had not yet sent rain to water the earth, for there was no people to cultivate the soil. Instead, springs came up from the ground and watered the land." Rain wasn't even a thing. The earth was watered here, it says, by springs, kind of like dew. It would just come up out of the ground in the morning, and that's the way it was done. The whole atmosphere was kind of different at that time. So here's Noah building this ark, and people are coming up saying, "Hey, why are you doing that?" And he says, "Because it's going to rain." And they're like, "What?" You see, sometimes it doesn't even make sense. Not only that, the largest body of water was probably about 500 miles away. That's like building a ship in the middle of the Mojave Desert or downtown Las Vegas. It just doesn't make sense. Here's an idea. Why don't we build it next to some water? But what they were doing, what God was asking Noah, it didn't make sense. And not only that, what about the animals? How in the world does he go about rounding up all these animals, two of every kind, male and female? Some of these animals, they look like each other. It's kind of hard to tell. Is that a male and a female, or is that two males? If he goofs that up, it's going to kind of wreck the plan, I think. You see, when you look at this, honestly, none of it really made any sense. And yet, Noah obeyed. He obeyed. He didn't argue. He didn't complain. He didn't bellyache. He just said, "Okay, Lord, whatever you say." He obeyed God's instructions right down to the letter. You see, one of the real tests of faith is really, how do I obey? How do I follow through on what God tells me to do? Do I follow his instructions even when they don't make sense? Do I follow his instructions even when I don't understand? Because this is really obedience. And Noah, we see, he followed completely and wholeheartedly. The fourth characteristic of a person that God uses is that they never give up. Noah never gave up. God uses people like that. He uses people who don't give up. People who won't quit. Now, this job that God gave Noah, it was a big task, right? Do you ever stop and think about how long that took? How long did it take to build the ark? The Bible, when you look at it, it doesn't exactly tell us how long it took, but it does offer some clues along the way. For example, in Genesis chapter 5, Noah is mentioned for the very first time. And in Genesis chapter 5, we're told he's 500 years old. And then we're told later on when he enters the ark, he's 600 years old. So the time it took to build the ark would depend on the time that passed between Genesis chapter 6, verse 14, when God told Noah to build it, and Genesis chapter 7, verse 1, where God told him to get in it. So some scholars believe that Noah took 120 years to do that. 120 years to build the ark. And they base that on Genesis chapter 6, verse 3. They have this whole thing thought out, and we're not going to get into it, but that's what they believe. There's others who say, no, it took around 100 years based on Noah's age that we see in Genesis chapter 5 compared to his age in chapter 7 here. Now, here's the thing. Either way you choose to answer that, I think it's safe to say that it's somewhere in there. 100 years, 120 years, you decide, The point is this. It was a long time. That was a long time And he never gave up. I look at that and say, man, that's rather amazing. Because there are three things in life that will usually make a person quit something or give up. Problems are one. When problems keep coming at you one after another, it's like, okay, maybe this wasn't meant to be. People back away. They crumble because of problems. Pressures are another one. When you're under pressure day in, day out, that can make you quit. People, they can make you quit. When you're continuously dealing with people problems, that can wear you down because people will resist you, they'll fight you, they'll try to sabotage your work, they'll criticize you, they'll mock you, and that can take a toll. And I'm guessing when you look at this, Noah, he was dealing with all three. He had problems, he had pressures, he had people issues going on. And I'll bet there were plenty of days when Noah, he just hated the thought of getting out of bed. Here we go again. I'm done with this thing. I don't want to do it. I'm tired. I don't want to do this. Why do I feel that way? Because I know I would have. I look at this and what he was going through, the time span, all this stuff, all the problems, all the pressures, the people, all this stuff, the environment that he was doing this in. But he didn't. He stayed with it. Day in, day out, year after year after year. Cutting, boring, framing, notching, sealing. He just never quit. You see, these are the kind of people that God uses. He uses people who are available, people who are willing to be different, people who are completely committed to Him, people who just won't quit. And that is why He used Noah the way He did. The Bible says Noah was a righteous man. It says he was a godly man. It says Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord when nobody else did. But you know what? That does not mean he was perfect. Because he wasn't perfect. After this point in his life, we are told, after this incredible thing he did, after this incredible way that God used him, he hit a place, we're told, that where he planted a vineyard and he made some wine. And in Genesis chapter 9, verse 21, we're told he got drunk and took his clothes off and made a fool of himself. Why? Well, that's a different message. People can only speculate on that anyhow. I don't want to speculate here right now. The point is, he did it. He wasn't perfect. And so often we think that God only uses perfect people. He doesn't. It's not about being perfect. God isn't looking for perfection here. He's looking for people who are available, who are willing to be different, people who are going in wholeheartedly, people who won't quit. That's why God used Noah here. He was just an ordinary guy that God used to do something great, something amazing. And the neat thing is even though he wasn't perfect, God still put him in the Hall of Fame in Hebrews chapter 11. God was still saying, Noah, he's my man. Look what he did. He didn't quit. That's pretty neat. Why did God use him? Because the eyes of the Lord are looking and searching the whole world, looking for that one person, that one individual who is wholeheartedly committed to Him. And when God finds him or her, He strengthens them. He gives them what they need. He builds them up. He fortifies them. He equips them. Why? Because I want to use that person. Purpose of this series is to encourage you to see yourself the same way. No, I don't want you to get drunk and take your clothes off and leave your clothes on. Avoid the alcohol there. I want you to see yourself that God can use even ordinary me. Even though you think you've got nothing to offer, I want you to dream about that. I want you to dream what God can do and wants to do through just ordinary you. This world is messed up, and God is just looking for anyone who will step up and say, God, I don't know what you want to do with me, but here I am. I'm going to follow you with everything I have. I'm willing to be different. I'm willing to make myself available. And I promise you right now, I'm not going to quit. You want to be used by God? Watch what He does. Why don't you stand with me? I want to pray for you. Last week, or a couple weeks ago here, we talked about Moses and what he went through and how God used him. Again, an imperfect guy in the Hall of Fame. Here we see Noah. They were just ordinary people, right? Ordinary people that God used to do extraordinary things. I leave you with this question. How do you see yourself here? What does God want to do through you? I believe it's bigger than you realize. He's not looking for incredible talent. He's looking for availability. Because He wants you to build His kingdom with Him. He wants to use you that way, to do something special. And as Christ's followers, as His people, we are to be working with Him to build His kingdom. There's things He wants to do in this world, in this life. And to achieve that, we have to change our thinking, and we have to become kingdom-minded so we can travel and go where He wants us. I challenge you. Change your thinking. Start thinking something big. Just kingdom-minded. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for each person here right now. I pray that you would just anoint them and bless them for such a time as this. The job is big, but Lord, I believe you are looking. You are looking each and every day. You are searching the world for that one person, that one individual who is fully committed to you. Not that they have incredible talents, just ordinary people who are fully committed to you, who will follow through and be willing to be different. I believe when we follow you that way, that's when things happen. And I believe heaven is going to be filled with a lot of ordinary people that just trusted you to do extraordinary things. God, my prayer is that we would be one of those people, that we would be one of those churches. Father, we just commit ourselves to you now. I pray blessings upon us. Not for our sake, but for your glory, for your purpose. Use us in the way you want to. We commit ourselves to you now. We give you all the praise and the glory. Father, for that one person who doesn't know you in this important way, I pray that right now in this closing moment, they would just cry out to you. They would just say, Jesus,